The global terrorism trend has indicated a tactical shift towards self-radicalized or lone wolf terrorism incidents, many of which have involved active shooter incidents. In countries where access to guns has been difficult, there have been other means of mass killings. These have involved the use of knives, vehicles, or even homemade explosives. India, which has presumably seen a year-on-year decline in the number of terrorism incidents, as per the Global Terrorism Index, remains a volatile country and its threat perception from terrorism remains high. The Indian corporate sector should be aware that lone wolf attacks are not necessarily carried out by terrorist groups, but their tactics can be adapted easily by criminal groups or disgruntled individuals. In this episode of India Risk Report, we touch upon the risk of terrorism in India, the implications it holds for the economic growth of the country, and the need for effective training to secure the interests of the corporate sector.
Hello and welcome to another episode of India Risk Report, and in this episode we are looking most specifically at the new trends in terrorism and its implications for India. And we are going to try and understand that what India should really guard itself against, particularly in the light of the fact that despite the massive 26/11 attacks on Mumbai, there haven't been attacks of that scale faced by India subsequently. And could we attribute that to better capability and better preparations, or simply because that India is a challenge in terms of where and how a terrorist group can effectively act within, because the sheer vastness of the scale of the country. Despite that, India has been ranked 8th in the Global Terrorism Index, but it hasn't faced as yet a serious lone wolf attack. And we have two experts who are going to throw more light on the issue of the trends in terrorism and what India should prepare for. We have Mr. Bhardwaj with us, and he has earlier been with the NTRO, but most recently retired as an advisor with the Cabinet Secretariat, and obviously was looking at all the reports that keep coming in from agencies abroad and keeping us abreast of the trends. And we have Shivinder Singh, who's now a risk consultant with IRIS, our knowledge partner for this initiative. So I'll start with you, Shivinder. Now, where do you think our strength lies? Is it because we present a very blurred picture to a possible terrorist attack, that such large cities, so much of activity, but then again, few targets where they can hit and make an impact? Because a terrorist probably has one chance, maybe a second one, to be able to create the kind of impact that 26/11 attacks did. So, and unless you do something in a large scale, you don't remain in public memory. So that's what drives the terrorist. But what drives our own internal abilities to ward off attacks, or we just keep praying?
I think we have braved a lot of incidents which have taken over the last few decades. And also we saw very recently, if I may say, 26/11 was something which was a very different paradigm, sort of a shift from other terrorist activities which take place. So I think India does have the capacity and the capability to fight off such attacks, but we still have to look at what are the trends in across India that have changed. And also outside of India, what are the new trends which are coming in?
So what are the new trends?
So if I talk of the new trends, I think there is a term which is being used now, which is, you have mentioned it as the lone wolf attack or an active shooter scenario. And if I may say that 26/11 was also 5 such incidents of a lone wolf attack, where somebody attacked at a railway station or at a restaurant, at any other public place. So these are quite new possibilities which are there, because I think for the terrorist organization it poses and it gives him quite a bit of an advantage to hit at soft targets which are not hardened enough, instead of what was happening earlier, was attacking military installations and government installations.
Yeah, we'll come back to the lone wolf phenomena more, because one difference between 2611 and lone wolf could be just somebody who's been radicalized over the internet. It may be a personal vendetta against the government or the society because of communal clashes or whatever. And most importantly, lone wolf attacks don't get the kind of logistic support that 2611 attackers got from across the border. People are reluctant to say so, but I say so, from Pakistan. Mr. Bhardwaj, sir, there is certain degree of impact that any terror attack would have on the economy. Investor confidence is lost. There are increase in premiums of insurance. There is also a sense of panic amongst the employees who may not want to join an X company, not realizing a company that's been attacked once will probably never be attacked. You know, it is something else they will go for next time. So what do you feel that are the immediate fallouts of any major terror attacks?
Terror attacks per se are meant to terrorize. So the impact is quite obvious. You have just mentioned all of them.
So what preventive measures can be taken?
Okay, now, terror can take all forms, starting from the 70s and 80s when we were limited to hostage situations and some bomb attacks and letter bombs. It has come into various methods are being used, things like your chemical weapons, your cyber attacks, your different type of activities which are being done, including the lone wolf which you just mentioned. So you cannot pinpoint any particular act as it's going to happen or not happen. So it is there. You can't predict any of these things.
And you continue to prepare for something which might happen, but at the same time, the surprise may come in another area where you're not.
No, preparations are always on. The government is always preparing. It has different agencies for that matter.
I'll come back to you to the government point, because that is a sore point with a lot of people, that how much support the government is giving. But back to you, Surinder. Now, I want to understand lone wolf attacks. One of the reasons they say that it hasn't made much headway in India is because even now, anything from 75 to 82 so-called ISIS sympathizers have been rounded out about across the country. Now, in terms of per capita, this is really, really minimal. For considering the fact that India has something more than 170 million Muslims, and ISIS reaches out to Muslims in the hope of getting it. And this 170 million Muslims make it global Muslim 10% population. The highest per capita ratio, I'm told, in ISIS and bodies which are using social media to reach out to create lone wolf attackers have been in countries like Australia, in countries like Maldives, and even across Central Asia, and for a variety of reasons, the Arab world. But the point to understand is that what is it that is not allowing ISIS to really get enough people from India on its side?
Right. So, as you said, lone wolf attacks can actually be for many reasons. It could be because of radicalization, because of based on religious lines, but also there is a trend now which we are seeing, which is very common, and that is self-radicalization. And why I say self-radicalization is we live in the age where there is social media, there is internet, and you are in the form of a push sort of information. A lot of information is being pushed to you through WhatsApp, from your phones, mobiles, and YouTube, whatever you are watching. And terrorist organizations are motivated to send their information across this medium, and they want that individuals should get radicalized themselves. Therefore, they don't have to work on the logistics and the other part of this. So I think that is one. And the second thing is you have to attribute this to the intelligence agencies, that they are actually in India, they are working and they are finding out the early the signs of any radicalization and reporting it, and therefore coming down to it.
Mr. Bhardwaj, sir, that's exactly the point you were making earlier, and again I want to labor on that terrorists have to be lucky only once. intelligence agencies and police officers have to be lucky every time. But to what extent is there any mechanism to share intelligence about such attacks outside of government circles? You get to know in Delhi, you inform the state government, but the state government, where an attack is impending, does it call up and alert the hotel industry or the airline industry or the banks to say that, listen, this is a governmental announcement, just be careful?
Well, if you come to know of an attack, it's quite obvious that you have to tell the target.
Did they in 2611?
2611 was a different scenario altogether. In fact, people have pulled up the socks after that.
Okay.
And things have changed considerably. You've had quite a few organizations which have come up. NIA is one of them. Unfortunately, NCTC is yet to take off. But government has been putting its act together. I'll just give you some examples. Op Chakravyuh, this is one which I'm saying which dates back to 2014, and Op Pigeonhole, which is last year. Now, this is where the intelligence agencies have sort of assumed roles of the IS, got into the net, have identified thousands, as much as 800 and 1,000 odd students, youth, and weaned them away from going towards the IS way. So these are the activities that the government keeps doing behind the scenes.
Okay, so very important points brought out in this part of the discussion, and we'll be back after a break to look at what are the other factors that continue to be of concern to us and how we must prepare ourselves both as a society and as citizens to fight against this menace of terror. But that after a break. Welcome back. We are looking at the various facets of modern terrorism and how it could impact on India, its citizens and its businesses. Shivinder, we were looking at the aspect of lone wolf in particular, and there was some facts that I wanted to rattle out. You know, that just to say that ISIS propaganda would only target one community is probably not fair, because if you see the example of incidents of lone wolf terror, there was Stephen Gray, a 32-year-old former British Air Force serviceman who decided to convert to Islam and went and fought with the ISIS. Then you had Aqsa Mahmood, a 19-year-old dropout from Glasgow University who married some ISIS commander in Syria and went to fight there. And then you have the case of Nidal Hassan, a 39-year-old US Army psychiatrist who in 2009 opened fire at a military base in Fort Hood, Texas, killing 13 people. So, you know, do you believe that our focus should be on anybody and everybody who may be leaning or showing sympathies towards this radical form of Islamic terror? Or do you believe that we should just be preparing a counter narrative to the narrative that comes out through social media and flood the social media with counter narrative?
So I think we do not have to restrict ourselves to one philosophy saying that a particular religion would probably be only involved in radicalization, and as you pointed out, there are a number of cases like this. Also, there are lots of studies which showed a stark difference between what is happening in the United States and the rest of the world. Most of these lone wolf attacks which you are saying are happening because of psychological issues and issues related to personality. It could be a workplace violence or unemployment or something related to that. But in parts of the rest of the world, yes, there is a force which is responsible for radicalizing. But having said that, we live in an age of internet, and therefore it is not difficult to convert a particular person's ideology irrespective of a religion. Like you said, there are so many cases which have been seen. So we cannot lower our guard just because of that and say that, okay, fine, we have a particular section only we need to look at. This narrative has to be opened up to all, and corporates and private institutions have to look at doing partnership with the government in this and start training on this.
Mr. Bhardwaj, sir, counter to that point is that while India certainly doesn't resort, to my experience, to the kind of racial profiling that the Americans blatantly do, but there have been reports that have been coming in that a lot of people who are veering towards ISIS type propaganda, it is a kind of a counter response to traits and activities which smack of communalism in our society, which is leading to certain amount of rioting, a lot of pressure on people, and even compulsory subjugation to what many people believe is the agenda of the right-wing political parties. So, do you find that the people who are dissenters of the current government in power are overstating the case, or do you find that it could be that these cases could convert a moderate into a lone wolf?
One thing is very clear. Radicalization is the most important issue facing us today. Government of India has to tackle this. Now, there could be compulsions on the party, whether it's political or otherwise. If they're going to use this particular card, it is unfortunate. But the security agencies are aware as to how they should go about their tasks, and they are doing whatever they're supposed to do.
Like what?
Well, big data analytics, predictive analytics, this is based on past incidents. These are all giving you a tool to the decision makers, to the people who are supposed to implement various procedures to prevent things from happening. So, these sort of activities are ongoing.
Okay, so there obviously you can't outline everything on television, but the government is seized of the matter and they are taking the necessary steps. But Shivendra, back to you again. Anti-terrorism laws and initiatives have still to find the kind of momentum that they should have in India. And that could work as a deterrent against those resorting to the use of terror. In India, the conviction rate is less than 2%. So, what strikes you as completely unusual about India, which has not been short of terror attacks? It's still very much in the news in this country, and you could always have another terror attack anytime, anywhere. But then what happens? I mean, do we go into television dramas like we did with Kasab's case, or do we go into just straightforward conviction? In fact, across the border in Pakistan, the situation is even worse. The Supreme Court has abdicated responsibility to the army chief to decide who's a terrorist and hang him.
Right. I think we have a problem there with what you have said, and we have seen that there is a delay in meting out the judicial punishment to such cases. But like what Mr. Bhardwaj has brought out, we have now something which is preempting us going into that problem. This problem surely will be there, but by use of various big data analytics and social media, you can actually find out these section of people who are actually going to get into that. And also maybe a step before the self-radicalization, you could have certain people contacting them and start something of a counseling session or a remediation process to kind of bring them back to the mainstream. It's possible because,
but how do you track down who is hearing ISIS propaganda?
I'm talking of everything which is open in the social media. A lot of things like, for example, just to give you an example of Stephen Paddock, who carried out the attack in Las Vegas, and he killed around 500 people were injured and a lot of people were killed. In the same thing, he was using his Twitter account for very vociferously telling propaganda about the government and taking a revenge, and his profile said he's a gun runner, and he did everything. He in fact posed with a gun also. They couldn't take up those signals early in the time, or maybe they ignored because there are so many of them, whatever the reason is. But a lot can be done before a particular act of terror actually takes place, and that's where I think it's better to prevent than to come back to and try to solve this problem.
Mr. Bhardwaj, sir, here is a thought, and this was suggested to me by a major industrialist who is associated with one of India's biggest IT companies. Isn't it about time we raise a cyber army in a form? It's a loose term, coming from the military as you do and I do, and as Shivendra does, that an army is a very, very large force. But a cyber force that does not have to prescribe itself to all the haircut and the uniform norms, etc., but are whiz kids who will actually do exactly what Shivendra is suggesting, that have the time to look at signals which other important people like yourself and your colleagues at the CAPSEC don't get time to go into details there, because you're looking at the bigger picture.
You're right, Maruf. There are trillions and trillions of signals in the air which one can intercept. But then analyzing them is another ball game altogether. The government alone cannot do it. You need a cyber army. And cyber army does not necessarily mean people in uniform. It means people who are outside uniform also. So I think it's a very good suggestion, and I'm sure the government will be taking on this. Something must be on.
Well, thank you very much. For those who must be watching this program, here is a thought to take away, that if India is to have a cyber army very quickly, not just to look at the security challenges, which the security establishment seems to be pretty much in control of, but the unconventional challenges which will come to our society and to our industry. Creation of a cyber army, what it should look like, what kind of people should come in, and how they could get the importance that they deserve, is something that we must think about and deliberate about in future. Thanks very much for being with us on this show. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, goodbye.